The desperate plea. The vast expanse of space was silent, but on the Zokthar homeworld, there was nothing but chaos. Flames rose high into the sky, thick black smoke curling around the once beautiful cities. The ground trembled as massive Draven warships hovered overhead, unleashing destruction upon the helpless. The Zokthar were a peaceful species, known for their wisdom and diplomacy. Their civilization had flourished for thousands of years without war. They had no military, no weapons, only their knowledge and culture, but knowledge could not stop the enemy that had come for them. The Draven Imperium was ruthless, a war-driven empire known for conquest and slavery. They did not negotiate. They did not offer mercy. Their massive fleets had appeared in Zokthar space without warning, and within hours, the first cities had fallen. Inside a hidden underground bunker, Elder Vocal, leader of the Zokthar Council, stood before a dimly lit holographic table. His usually calm face was filled with despair as he looked at the data. The planetary defenses had crumbled. The remaining cities would not last much longer. Beside him, Advisor Lena spoke in a trembling voice. "Elder, our last transmission to the Galactic Council received no response. They will not help us." Vocal closed his eyes. He had expected this, but the confirmation still felt like a dagger to his chest. The Galactic Council was made up of many powerful species, each concerned only with their own survival. They had debated and hesitated, unwilling to risk war against the Draven. "They have abandoned us," Vocal whispered. A sudden tremor shook the bunker. Dust rained from the ceiling, as distant explosions echoed through the underground chamber. The Draven were getting closer. Lena wiped tears from her large black eyes. "What do we do now, Elder? If no one comes, we will be extinct in days." For a long moment, Vocal did not speak. His mind was racing, searching for a solution. Anything that could save his people. And then, a name surfaced in his thoughts, a name spoken in whispers throughout the galaxy, a name that inspired both fear and awe. Humanity. The Deathworlders. The only species that thrived on a world considered too dangerous for life. They were warriors, survivors. While most of the galaxy avoided violence, humans had mastered it. The Council had always feared them, keeping them at a distance, treating them as a necessary evil. But now, the Zokthar had no choice. Vocal turned to Lena, his voice steady with newfound determination. "Prepare a transmission. Send it to Earth." Lena gasped. "The humans? But, Elder, they are dangerous, unpredictable. If we bring them here, what if? What if they do not come?" Vocal interrupted. His sharp gaze met hers. "Then we are already dead." Lena hesitated, then nodded and rushed to the control panel. She activated the long-range distress signal, routing it through encrypted channels. No one had contacted humanity directly in years. No one dared. The transmission began. "To the leaders of Earth, this is Elder Vocal of the Zokthar. Our people face extinction. The Draven Imperium has come to wipe us from existence. The Galactic Council has turned away from us. No one else will help. But you are not like them. You are warriors. You are Deathworlders. We do not ask for diplomacy or negotiations. We ask for survival. We ask for war. If you choose to answer, we will never forget. If you refuse, we understand. But if you come, we will owe you everything." Vocal ended the transmission and stepped back, his heart pounding. Had he just sealed his people's fate? Would the humans even listen? Would they come? Silence filled the bunker. The signal had been sent. Now, all they could do was wait. Outside, the night sky burned red with fire. The Draven forces advanced, merciless and unstoppable. The Zokthar had run out of time. Their last hope rested with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Would humanity answer the call? Humanity's answer. The message traveled across the galaxy, encoded in a desperate signal, reaching the Terran Defense Command on Earth. Deep within the military headquarters, a team of analysts decoded the transmission. At first, they hesitated. The Zokthar were a peaceful race. Why would they send such a direct plea for war? Then they saw the footage. Burning cities, screaming civilians, Draven warships unleashing destruction. The analysts wasted no time. They forwarded the message to the highest-ranking officials. Within minutes, the Terran High Command assembled. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of a vast war room, showing the Zokthar homeworld under siege. Military officers and generals stood in silence, their eyes scanning the devastation. At the head of the room, Admiral Kane, an older man with cold, calculating eyes, watched the footage with his arms crossed. He had seen countless wars, but something about this transmission felt different. "They're begging for help," one officer murmured. "The Council won't step in." "They never do," another spat bitterly. Kane narrowed his eyes. "The Draven Imperium." He exhaled sharply. "Arrogant bastards." Silence stretched across the room. The question no one wanted to ask hung in the air. Should humanity intervene? For years, humans had been kept at arm's length by the Galactic Council. Too aggressive, too unpredictable. The other species feared them, respected them, but rarely called upon them. Now, a desperate race had chosen humanity over the entire council. One officer hesitated. "Sir, if we do this, it's war with the Draven." Kane's voice was calm, steady. "The Draven are already at war. The question is, do we let them win?" A long pause. No one spoke. Then Kane straightened and gave his decision. "Send in the fleet." Alarms blared. Orders were given. Across the Terran Fleet Command, warships prepared for departure. Soldiers in power armor armed themselves. Weapons were loaded. Humanity had been called upon, and they would answer in the only way they knew how: with war. The invasion has begun. The Zokthar homeworld burned. The sky was thick with smoke as Draven warships hovered above ruined cities, firing mercilessly at the last remaining strongholds. Streets were filled with destruction. Collapsed buildings, shattered vehicles, and lifeless bodies. The Draven had taken nearly everything. Victory was inevitable. Inside their command center, Overlord Solvek stood tall, watching the destruction unfold on a massive holographic display. His golden armor gleamed under the dim light, his reptilian eyes filled with satisfaction. "The resistance is almost gone," a Draven officer reported. "The last bunkers will fall within hours." Zolvek smirked. "Weak. Pathetic. They should have surrendered." The Zokthar had been a simple conquest. No military, no defenses. The Galactic Council had refused to intervene as expected. Soon, their species would be erased, and the Draven Imperium would claim another world. But then, alarms blared. A Draven technician scrambled at his console. "Overlord, we have multiple ships entering the system at high speed." Zolvek frowned. "The Council." "No, sir. It's the humans." A heavy silence fell over the command center. Then the screen flickered, displaying the Terran fleet. The Deathworlders arrive. Hundreds of Terran warships dropped out of hyperspace, their dark metallic hulls gleaming against the backdrop of stars. The flagship, TSS Warhammer, led the charge, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. Admiral Kane sat in the command chair, staring at the enemy fleet. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of an entire species. "This is Admiral Kane of the Terran Armada. You have invaded a sovereign world. You have slaughtered innocents. Your time is up." The Draven fleet scrambled into battle formation. Zolvek's eyes narrowed. "So, the Deathworlders came." He chuckled. "Let's see if their reputation is earned." He raised his clawed hand and gave the order. "Destroy them." The first strike. The Draven fleet opened fire. Energy blasts surged through space, streaking toward the Terran warships. But humanity did not flinch. TSS Warhammer led the counterattack. Railguns spun up. Plasma cannons locked on. The fleet moved with precision, unleashing a storm of firepower. The first Terran salvo hit the Draven front line like a hammer. Railgun slugs, traveling at near light speed, tore through Draven battleships like paper. Explosions erupted across the enemy fleet. Zolvek's smirk vanished. "There! They're cutting through us," a Draven officer shouted in panic. Kane's voice echoed through the comms. "You picked the wrong species to attack." The battle had begun. The arrival of the Deathworlders. The space battle raged, but it was clear the Draven were losing. Human warships moved like predators, their railguns and plasma cannons firing in precise, devastating bursts. Draven shields shattered under the relentless assault. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as more enemy warships were torn apart. On the bridge of the TSS Warhammer, Admiral Kane watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. A communication request blinked on his screen. "Overlord Solvek." Kane smirked. He wants to talk. He accepted the transmission. Zolvek's reptilian face appeared, his golden armor scorched, his pride wounded. "Human, you have no claim to this war. Turn back, and we will allow you to leave." Kane leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You invaded a peaceful world. You butchered civilians. There is only one way this ends, Zolvek." The Draven overlord bared his fangs. "You think you can stop us? You are still outnumbered." Kane's smirk widened. Not for long. A sudden alarm blared through the Draven command center. "Overlord," a Draven officer screamed. "We have incoming. Ground troops, thousands of them." Zolvek turned toward his screens, and his blood ran cold. The drop begins. From the massive Terran warships, drop pods rain down like fireballs. Thousands of armored soldiers, Deathworlders, descended toward the battlefield. The Draven forces below looked up as the sky filled with streaks of fire. Then, impact. Drop pods slammed into the battlefield. The doors hissed open, and from the smoke emerged Terran shock troops. Clad in power armor, wielding advanced weapons, they charge. The Draven soldiers barely had time to react before the first bullets tore through their ranks. The battle turns. The Draven expected a slow, cautious attack. Instead, the humans rushed in with terrifying speed. Close quarters combat. Brutal efficiency. No mercy. A Draven officer raised his plasma rifle, only for a Terran soldier to crush his skull with a powered fist. Blades clashed, gunfire roared, and within minutes, the battlefield was covered in Draven bodies. The Zokthar survivors watched from the ruins, their eyes wide with shock. For the first time since the invasion began, hope returned. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were unstoppable. The battle for the Zokthar homeworld. The battlefield was a storm of fire and chaos. Terran shock troops moved like predators, tearing through Draven lines with brutal precision. Gunfire, explosions, and screams filled the air. Draven soldiers had expected an easy slaughter. Instead, they faced monsters. The Deathworlders did not fight like the rest of the galaxy. They did not hesitate. They did not fear pain. They did not stop. A war unlike any other. A Draven warlord raised his plasma cannon, aiming at a group of advancing Terrans. Before he could fire, a railgun slug ripped through his chest, sending his body crashing into the dirt. A Terran commando charged through the smoke, wielding a massive shock blade. With a single swing, he severed a Draven soldier in half. The enemy tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to run. Artillery shells rained down. Explosions tore through their ranks, sending debris and body parts flying. Humanity was not here to win a battle. They were here to end a war. The final push. Near the Zokthar capital, the last Draven stronghold stood defiantly. Massive energy cannons lined its walls, firing desperately at the advancing Terran forces. Inside, Draven commanders shouted orders, their voices tinged with fear. "They're breaking through. Hold the line. We must hold. Boom. The gates exploded inward. Terran soldiers stormed through, their armor stained with blood and ash. A Draven officer dropped his weapon and surrendered, only to be cut down by his own warlord. There is no surrender, the warlord bellowed. Fight to the last. And so they did. The final battle inside the stronghold was merciless. Hand-to-hand combat. Blades, fists, and gunfire. A Draven elite warrior lunged at a Terran soldier, only to be grabbed by the throat and slammed into the wall. His helmet cracked. Blood sprayed. Within minutes, the stronghold fell. The Terrans raised their banner. The battle was over. The Xocthar's gratitude. As the smoke cleared, the surviving Xocthar emerged from their hiding places. They looked at the Terran soldiers, at the destruction around them, and realized one thing. They were still alive. Their leader, Elder Vocal, approached Admiral Kane, who stood tall amidst the ruins. The Xocthar elder knelt, his voice trembling. "We owe you everything." Kane looked down at him. Then, with a small nod, he spoke. "You don't owe us anything. Just remember who came when no one else would." Above them, the Terran fleet remained in orbit, watching, waiting. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived. And the galaxy would never forget. Humanity's wrath. The battlefield was silent. Draven bodies lay scattered across the ruins, their once mighty empire broken and humiliated. Smoke still curled from the shattered stronghold, and the scent of burned metal and blood filled the air. The Xocthar homeworld had been saved, but humanity was not finished yet. The escape attempt. High above the planet, Overlord Solvek watched the disaster unfold from his flagship. His once mighty Draven armada had been obliterated. His soldiers had fallen. His empire had suffered a defeat unlike any before. This cannot be," he whispered. His claws dug into the metal armrest of his throne. They were just Deathworlders, savages. A trembling officer turned toward him. "Overlord, we must retreat." Zalvek's nostrils flared. His pride screamed at him to fight, but he knew the truth. The Draven had lost. "Prepare the fleet for warp," he ordered. "We will regroup. We will rebuild. And we will." Boom. A massive explosion rocked the flagship. Alarms blared. Holograms flickered wildly as reports flooded in. "Admiral Kane's forces have breached the outer defenses. They're targeting our warp drives." Zalvek's golden eyes widened. They weren't going to let him escape. The death blow. From the bridge of the TSS Warhammer, Admiral Kane watched the Draven flagship desperately trying to flee. His face was unreadable, his tone ice-cold. "Fire the main cannons." The order was given. A second later, the Warhammer's railguns thundered. High-velocity rounds, each the size of a building, screamed through space, striking the Draven flagship with pinpoint accuracy. The ship's shields collapsed instantly, its armor shredded like paper. Inside the burning flagship, Zalvek watched in horror as his empire's most powerful warship began to break apart. "No, this is impossible." His final words were lost in the roar of the explosion as the ship detonated in a massive fireball, taking the last remnants of the Draven fleet with it. The Draven Imperium had been utterly crushed. The galaxy watches. The battle had ended. The Xocthar were safe. But the universe had changed forever. Word of the battle spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council, the very ones who had ignored the Xocthar's plea, now watched in stunned silence. They had always feared humanity's potential. Now they had seen it with their own eyes. The Deathworlders were not just strong. They were unstoppable. A debt that can never be repaid. The battle was over. The Draven Imperium had been crushed. The skies above the Xocthar homeworld, once filled with enemy warships, were now clear. The Terran fleet remained in orbit, watching over the liberated planet like silent guardians. On the ground, the surviving Xocthar emerged from the ruins. They looked around in disbelief. Their cities were in ruins, their world scared, but they were alive. And they owed it all to the Deathworlders. A moment of understanding. Elder Vokal stood at the edge of a destroyed plaza, looking up at the towering figure before him. Admiral Kane. The human commander's armor was scared from battle, his expression unreadable. Behind him, his soldiers stood in formation, their weapons lowered but their presence undeniable. For the first time in history, a Zokthar leader stood face to face with a human warlord. Vokal took a deep breath and then, with great effort, knelt before Kane. The remaining Zokthar elders followed, bowing their heads in reverence. "We do not have the words," Vokal said, his voice trembling. "We called for aid, and no one answered. No one, except humanity." He looked up, eyes filled with gratitude. "We owe you everything." Kane studied him for a moment before shaking his head. "You don't owe us anything." His voice was calm, firm. "Just remember this day." Vokal nodded slowly. "We will. The galaxy will." A warning to the universe. High above, the Terran fleet prepared to depart. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. The Deathworlders had done the impossible. The Draven, once feared conquerors, were no more. The Galactic Council, who had refused to act, now found themselves facing a new reality. Humanity had chosen to fight, and when they did not lose. A final transmission was sent from the TSS Warhammer to the Council. It was short. A warning. "We do not seek war, but if the innocent call for help and you turn away, we will answer. And when we do, no force in the galaxy will stop us." With that, the Terran fleet jumped to FTL, disappearing into the void. The war was over, but the legend of the Deathworlders had just begun.